it's Gavin White here from Autotech Recruit again. So we're on episode 4 this morning. I'm very kindly welcome Karl Davis from Coachworks Consulting. Morning, Karl. How you doing?
Good, thanks, Gav.
Good. Keeping busy?
I'm keeping very busy volunteering my time. I've made it my mission to actually support anybody that's ever received an invoice from Coachworks during this lockdown period. Yeah. If anybody sees this and they haven't received a call from me, I promise you I will get round to that.
Good. Yeah, it's strange times at the moment, isn't it? Very strange. So we've slightly different format today. If anyone who's watched the first 3 episodes we've been doing with Andy, Quintin, and more recently Anthony McAteer. So myself and Karl wanted to take this in a slightly different direction today. So Karl's very kindly put some interesting content together for us today. So Karl's the content's going to be based on the 5 C's, and a lot of work, for those of you who know Karl in the industry, is all about harnessing business improvement. So there's a lot of things in there that are quite apparent for the current time we're in, and how we can look to the future and actually use this time to reflect. I know a lot of our guests so far have been talking about what does the future hold and that, but I think Karl's got some real magic in here that I think we can definitely focus in on in the coming weeks and months, and start to strategize how we move out of this and moving forward. So over to you, Karl. If I start ready to start talking about the 5 C's. So I think the first section is change. Do you want to lead us into?
Yeah. Just to position things, Gav. It's a cruel time at the moment. Talking to our clients throughout the UK, some offshore as well. Just about everyone said the year had got off to a good start. Mm-hmm. Just about everyone said they were looking to do their budget in Q1. March had got off to a decent start as well. And it's just a shame that we're in the position that we're in, but we are in this position. And what's really encouraging is, as I'm talking to clients up and down the country, virtually every one of them says we're going to come out of this stronger. And that's really encouraging. Now, I'm sure right now I'm not the only one thinking, well, my balance sheet may not be as strong in the short to medium term, but so many feel that they'll be fitter, they'll be more focused, they'll be more appropriate for where the market's going. So we've got to try and take some good out of this. You mentioned the 5 C's. What I've done, guys, is just tried to focus on a handful of things. If we need to take our socks off to count how many points we're going to make, we're focusing on too many things. So 5 things I'd like to focus on. 1 is change. 2 is the need to collaborate. 3 is how we face the challenge that we've got. 4, then communicating it. And 5, finding opportunities to celebrate. And that might sound a bit bizarre right now, but I promise you, we need to find those opportunities. So what I'd also like to do, if I may, is use this opportunity to share some of the classic reading that's out there. So I've got 5 books, 1 book which I think will help us with each of these topics. And you'll know these books. Gavin, you'll have them on your shelf, your colleagues and your listeners will too. But it might be time to read them or reread them if we've read them before. So if I can I move on to the first of the 5 C's? The first one is change. And change is upon us properly at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, what we've got to do is we've got to decide whether we're going to be proactive or reactive. Some things we can't influence, but there are others that we can. So we've got to decide whether we're going to resist it or whether we're going to embrace it. So I'm going to give you 2 words: change shape. But if I said to you, just flip those words around into shape change, the meaning is something very different. And through our work, and there's 4 things that Coachworks do. We do consulting projects, pieces of work, we train people, we coach people, and we provide digital solutions as well. But this is something that we spend such a lot of time on, helping people make the changes that they want to change. And the first point to appreciate is that some change you can shape. And if you get to shape that change because you've embraced it wholeheartedly, you might end up with an endpoint, a solution that suits you better, rather than just having it forced upon you. I think the important thing with change is we've got to identify that some things we cannot affect. So it's pointless, Gav, wasting time trying to affect things that we have no influence over. I think it's really important, whilst we're in this crisis, to just keep looking ahead. There's no point harking back to how it used to be, because the other common sort of point that's coming out of my conversations with business leaders up and down the country is that it's not going to look too much like it used to look like.
Yeah.
And we're finding this sort of new norm. We're trying to imagine how it's going to be. So let's keep looking forward. And I'd suggest after this interview, go out to your car, Gav. I was going to say which one it is, but I shouldn't be brand specific. Rip out the rear view mirror and stick it in your glove box, because you don't need it. Just keep looking forward.
Yeah.
And let's be realistic. The high street, not just in the UK, in lots of markets, but the high street is littered with organisations, retailers that didn't reflect the change that was taking place. We've got to understand that we've got to change or die. And I'm going to give you the first quote of the day, if I may. So the book I recommended you to read was Who Moved My Cheese? And the first quote of the day seems to be the most appropriate one. It's from Darwin. It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. Yeah. Change or die. We're only ever going to thrive again if we survive in the first instance. Yeah. So if I may, that's my first point that I'd like to sort of close with there.
Yeah, massive. Yeah, I think very valid point. Yeah. So you're saying the change facing the industry is doable?
I'm saying that failure is inevitable, Gav, if we don't actually face up to the challenges that we've got. We've got to embrace change, and we've got to try and shape the things that we can influence. If we don't do that, we try and resist it, we really are in a pickle.
Yeah, and quite interesting as well when you talk about, you know, when you look at the high street, Primark being a prime example of that, you know, a brand that's probably quite new in terms of a high street name, only been around probably in the last decade or so, but how they've gone from what I think the figures were something like £750 million a week in sales to zero, because they didn't have an online platform or anywhere to sell their goods online. So you know, and looking at a lot of the garages that obviously we deal with and that, and reading a lot of articles in the motor trade press at the moment, you know, change is going to have to happen in terms of how people sell their products and services to their clients moving forward, whether that's online, virtually, remotely, whatever you want to call it. I think you're absolutely right. You know, people are going to have to embrace change, whether they've currently ever wanted to or not. You know, so otherwise, you're going to die.
I think there's a place for the high street. There's certainly a place for car repairers and car showrooms, but it needs to feel like a destination. Yeah. It needs to feel like an experience when you get there, rather than just a repository of stuff, because all that stuff comes on a van now, doesn't it? Yeah. So it's got to be experiential. But you know, I'm not presenting myself as a retail guru, but I do know something about change, and we've got to try and shape it ourselves rather than have it forced upon us.
Yeah, absolutely. So just before we move on to the next point, just want to say to the viewers watching, there's just a little bit of lag on Carl's screen a little bit, so hopefully it will catch up. We can hear you perfectly well, Carl, but it's just a sort of a slight minute lag on the picture, so hopefully it will catch up in a minute with the internet speed. So moving into onto C number onto the second C then, so collaborate. The where do we go with collaboration?
Wow. Well, I Googled the other day how many recessions I've worked through, retailed through in the main, and it's 3. But we're already seeing markets around the world now that are sharing their Q1 performance GDP, and they're into significant recession, big time. We saw it on the news last night. One of the countries at 6 or 7%, biggest recession since World War II. And I do believe things will bounce back.
Yeah.
But until they bounce back, and in readiness for that bounce back, I'd urge your listeners to actually collaborate, because this is testing us like never before. And the decisions and strategies that we create now will have a lasting impact on all our stakeholders.
Yes.
Our colleagues, our customers, our suppliers. So it's important that we imply an importance weighting, as we call it, to the strategic decisions we've got to make. Those really big ones that need to be carefully thought out. Some decisions you've got to make quickly, but let's make sure that we prioritize that sort of thought process and decision-making strategy. In support of collaboration, your colleagues might want to look at this book. Now, this is an abridged version for a leader who told me he didn't have enough time to read books. So we're going the smallest version of the 7 habits of highly effective people. And one of those 7 habits is about synergizing. So the best strategies in our experience with our clients, in the aftermarket, in car sales, OEMs, franchise, independents, the best decisions come from those organizations where people join forces and they share their experience. Also, Gavin, I'd urge your listeners to actually surround themselves with diverse people with diverse opinions, not a room full of mini-me's, because that will test the decision-making and the strategic process as a result. And also, just as you mentioned, the high street and 1 or 2 markets, let's take a look around. Let's look around of what's happening, just like ministers and government experts are in the UK, looking at other markets to see, countries, to see how they're handling this particular crisis that they've got also. So include your peers in the process. Sure, as the business leader, you've got the casting vote. I get that. But I'd urge your listeners not to be autocratic at this point. I'd urge them to empower the people they've put around them in their leadership teams, and make the most of what we call the multiplier effect. If you get those decisions right at the very top of the pyramid, you can multiply it down all the way to maximum effect. So just like, I suppose, if there's any, you're a parent, Gavin, I'm a parent, just like trying to steer a child through adolescence, it's easier when there's 2 parents to consider those key moments, anticipate them, the potential responses that they're going to use, and reach good sound decisions and then communicate it consistently and effectively. So collaboration is key right now. And that doesn't have to be just in your own circle of friends or colleagues. We should be reaching out and networking too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you there. And you know, speaking from our own business and what we're currently doing at the moment, you know, there's 6 of us out of 32 people in the office that are currently still in a working group. The remainder being furloughed, and every day we have a morning Zoom call, or sort of morning Microsoft Teams call, an evening Microsoft Teams call, to, you know, talk about the day, bounce ideas off of one another, you know, get people's gauge, you know, and they become really good talking points where people either challenge, you know, I'm renowned for coming up with lots of different ideas, and if I didn't have those people behind me challenging whether they're the right things to do, then, you know, it could be a completely different outcome and different picture, isn't it? You know, if you're sort of just going off in the wilderness trying to do it all on your own, you know. So the support and the collaboration, like you say, is massive. And, you know, talking to other friends, family, people in the industry, you know, I've probably spoken to, you know, a lot of people in the industry more of late than I ever have done before. That, you know, we all know we've got people's names and contact numbers in your phone book, or that, you know, you may call or text every now and again, but, you know, now's the time to really start leaning on those people's knowledge and experience, isn't it? You know, and bouncing ideas and off of everybody, because, you know, like people say, there's never one crazy idea. There's never a wrong crazy idea, is there? But it's, you know, in some cases, no decision is, or no idea or decision made on an idea is, can sometimes be disastrous, can't it? So
yeah, indeed.
So on the third C is about challenge. What's the single biggest challenge facing retailers right now, do you feel?
I think there's sort of two that form one. I was asked this question at a conference I spoke at last year, an IMI conference in the UK. And the question was posed, what's the biggest challenge facing retailers right now? And I thought about it long and hard. I let some of the other panelists give their opinion first. And then I responded to the person who posed the question with a two-part answer. And I think it really relates to where we are right now. I think the first part of the answer is cash. We've got to make sure that we remain liquid. If we run out of cash, no matter how big our order book is or how many fans we've got and how full the diary is, we're dead. So we've got to make sure we don't run out of cash. And obviously that's what we've been doing, haven't we, for the last 4 or 5 weeks, big time. The second point that I made then, which is very relevant now because it has an impact on cash and overheads, is we've got to decide whether we have a human being complete that task or whether we have a bot, an algorithm, a computer, a robot do it. That's really important. And I read an interesting piece in the UK press yesterday from John Cohen, the editor of Motor Trader, talking about how more car finance applications are going online. And I actually commented, if you've been able to apply for your mortgage online, if you've got a reasonably straightforward mortgage, why on earth wouldn't you want to do that?
Makes
car.
sense.
You don't have to walk into an office and have a finance, business manager take you through the process. Now, the challenge here is obviously that's going to have a massive impact on retailer revenues. So yet again, the retailer's going to be challenged to actually find other ways to supplement that revenue if it starts to diminish. So I've got a few points I'd like to take your colleagues through. I'm just going to take a look at my notes here.
Yeah.
I've already said we need to focus on the road ahead, and we've got to be clear on where we want to get to. Well, that's thriving, having survived in the first instance. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see so often around the UK and in some of those other markets is that people know but they don't do. And there's a big difference between knowing and doing. Right now, the challenge is to break some of those old habits, Gavin, and form new ones. And some of those new habits are counterintuitive. Typically in most cultures, when you greet somebody, you might actually touch, shake hands, hug them, embrace them. Typically, we'd be meeting face to face. Well, we're doing it on a digital platform.
Yeah.
In the UK, we've formed a habit now of shopping more often, and convenience stores have been thriving, and those big superstores have been struggling with huge overheads. But now we've gone back to shopping weekly. And when we socialise, we do it infrequently and at a distance. So there's some new habits we're having to form that are counterintuitive, and they may not be our preferred way of doing things, but it's a necessary way. So the biggest challenge I think we've got is to help colleagues and customers form some of those new habits.
Yeah.
We work with all sorts of businesses, and some of the high-end businesses that we work with in the retail sector, in the franchise sector rather, their facilities have drive-in service lanes. Yeah. And just like those businesses had to educate their colleagues and their customers how to use that new approach, that's what we've got to do with some of the challenges that we're facing right now. One of the things I'd ask your listeners to consider is why they're in business. What's the whole purpose that they probably put their shirt on the line? And that's a nice shirt, if I might say so, Gavin. You've got it going on there. Why did they put the shirt on the line? They wanted to actually achieve something. And there's a great book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why. We help a number of our clients with this book. And that teaches us to understand why we are existing in business, let's say. It helps us to understand how we want to move forward, and then specifically what it is we're going to do. That's really important right now across all of these topics that we're talking about. So the challenge then, once we understand why, how and what, is to communicate our message in a way that's going to be well received. And I would urge everyone to go straight for the most popular radio station in the land. Do you know what that is, Gavin?
Not a clue, mate. No.
Okay, it's WIIFM.
Right.
What's in it for me? So if we're communicating in a way that
Yeah.
addresses the what's in it with me, for me, we draw people in, don't we?
Yeah.
So let's face facts. We've got to behave differently, whether we like it or not. And the influence of behaviour is consequence. And the ministers in the UK and the special advisors are spelling that out daily at 5 p.m. when they address the nation. There's a consequence of not social distance. There's a consequence of not staying at home. There are consequences that we face right now in business that we have to get right.
Yeah.
So that's it really for challenge. Should we move on to the next C?
Yeah. So communicate. So communication is something business leaders do every day, isn't it?
Yeah. You know, we're taught this, like, you know, we're taught to feed ourselves and walk. But do you know what? Communication is grossly undervalued and underestimated. And probably the biggest mistake that we make is we fail to prepare. Second quote of the day, Albert Einstein, I'm paraphrasing this. Albert Einstein said, if we can't explain it simply, we don't understand it well enough. And the point I'm making here, Gavin, is we've got some really important messages to communicate. So we've got to really get this right.
Yeah.
And who have we got to communicate to? We've got to re-engage, haven't we, with colleagues as we bring them back off furlough, and with customers as we welcome them back into our business.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to outline the challenges and the opportunities too, because there are opportunities. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think out of the 5 C's, actually, I think this is probably the biggest one for me personally, because, you know, communication is kind of key in every single one of these C's and everything you need to do. I think for me, where some businesses find this a real challenge is time consuming. It can be time consuming, and certainly in a situation where we're at the moment, I'm hearing stories of garages or garage groups. You know, they're putting staff on furlough, and that's been going on since March potentially, and all that staff have received is either an email or a pretty basic knock together letter. You know, doesn't sort of, if you're an employee, potentially fill you full of confidence, does it? You know, it's you know, if you've received an email or a letter, or let's put the shoe on the other foot, it's a customer, you know, there's nothing wrong with that then being backed up with a phone call or a conversation around, do you understand your letter? What are your feelings about it? Have you got any questions about it? You know, or Mr. Customer, were you aware that, you know, quite a lot of dealerships we've been talking to in the last few weeks, or independent garages, actually a lot of their customers assumed they were closed. They just assumed the garage would be closed. Well, actually, and there was one dealership in Northampton, actually, when they actually bothered to pick up the phone and communicate to their customers that they were actually still open, 90% of their customers said, "Oh, we just assumed you'd be closed." "Oh yeah, that's fine. I'll book my car in for an MOT and service it." So it's unless people are prepared to take the time to communicate and make the effort to communicate, you're never going to know, are you? You know.
No, that's a really good point. I think there's a range of communication going on right now, and there's some stuff that's really inspiring me. There's some stuff been going on that, you know, quite frankly, I was dismayed by. But we're all facing up to something that we weren't prepared for.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Gavin. I didn't even know what the word furlough meant until about 4 or 5 weeks ago.
No, I didn't.
So
no.
we're doing this on the hoof, aren't we?
And it's all we dream of now.
I think what's really important, though, the way we communicate right now, we've got to be seen to living out our values, what we stand for. And if we get the communication right, we're going to build our brands. And I think what's really important is we've got to focus on the big message. And I'm going to introduce the 4th book of this morning, and that is The 4 Disciplines of Execution. It's a belter. All of these books have been printed in the millions and in many languages. one of the 4 disciplines of execution your listeners will know if they've read the book is you've got to focus on the wildly important goals, the wildly important message. That's really key, because let's not try and communicate everything at once. You made a good point, Gavin, that the wildly important to communicate was we are still open for business. That was a really important message that needed to be got out there for that business.
Yeah.
So communicating it effectively is essential. You got to choose your words carefully. And I would say that first wildly important communication becomes the foundation that other communications can be built upon.
Yeah.
So it's got to be thought through, hasn't it? Just like I've thought through some preparation for today's conversation.
Yeah.
These are big messages, big challenges, big issues, big opportunities. We've got to think them through carefully. So if we actually build upon the most popular radio station in the land, WII-FM, by applying what we call the HI1P2 formula. Now, people out there that know the Coachworks team, or they've heard me speak or work with me, will know that HI1P2 stands for human interest first, process second. Now, I don't know everything about you, Gavin, but I know you've got a couple of kids. I know you've got business interests taking off in other countries. I know you've been helping a mate out last night when maybe it didn't suit you, but it needed to be done, because I've shown a bit of human interest in you.
Yeah.
And I think what's really important now is that our communications need to be about them, not us.
Yes.
Let's talk to our customers about them and their needs, rather than starting off with us and our need. That's really, really important.
Yeah.
Would you agree that sometimes the expression less is more is important too?
Yeah, definitely. I absolutely agree with that. And I think, again, this is probably this particular section for me, communicate. This is one that you could probably talk about for hours and hours, because in my experience and working in the industry for over 20 years nearly now, I think it's an industry that we're very good at communicating in certain ways. And I think you hit the nail on the head then. As an industry, we're very good at communicating about what we want, not necessarily about what's right for our customers and our employees, and I think that's something that we as an industry definitely need to change moving forward. I know it's some of the businesses that we deal with. I'm sure some of the businesses that you coach and deal with, Karl, they do get this stuff, hence why they're the leaders in our industry at doing what they do. But in my opinion, they generally tend to be the minority, not the majority. And I think if you're putting an overarching across the whole industry, many lifestyle businesses out there, garages that are run basically, as a lifestyle business. But, this stuff is just going to become more and more and more apparent. All the 5 C's you've got here, a fundamental values, I suppose, key values that you want in any business, whether you're a small independent or a global OEM and franchise.
That's a good point, Gavin, because the point I'm going to make here now is we've got to be authentic. We've got to be authentic to who we are and what we believe in. People will see through it. As consumers, we're more savvy than we've ever been. This whole sort of platform of the internet.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. We're both going to say the same thing. Then the power of the internet has just made everybody almost an expert, if you like. Everybody likes to think they're an expert, but it's definitely given them more information and data and power to hold against you and use against you. So I agree with you. You've got to be authentic, because people just see straight through the smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, I think so. And on the final point around communication, let's for the Brits that are watching this, let's be authentic to our DNA. Excuse me. And where it's appropriate, let's try and inject some fun.
Yeah.
Because for your international listeners, can I just remind them that humour was invented in Great Britain? Okay. Italy, we may have learned about love, and France, we may have learned about fine wine Japan, we may have learned about the microchip, but let's try and introduce a bit of fun where it's appropriate.
Yeah.
That's key too when we're communicating.
Yeah. No. So, and so moving on to the fifth C, celebrate. Something, again, I don't think, probably not just as an industry, but as a country, we've kind of lost out of our social fabric a little bit. I was lucky enough to go over to the NADA convention in February over in Las Vegas with ASE Global, and let's be fair, the Americans know how to celebrate. They find a dime on the floor, about it. So, and I definitely think that's something we've lost in our DNA, socially, in our social fabric as a country, not only in this industry, but will business find it more difficult to celebrate under such budgetary pressures moving forward, do you think, Carl?
Well, I'll answer that question, but let me just make the point first off, Gavin, that you said you've gone to NADA. Let's be honest. You are a serial sort of networker, aren't you?
Yeah.
One of your colleagues told me when I was in your office recently that Gavin gets excited about the opening of an envelope. So you put yourself out there, but you benefit from it. You network really well, and we all need to do that. Celebration is easier with a big budget. You can grandstand and you can do fantastic things. But at the end of the day, what I'm going to talk about now is recognition and celebrating things in a way that costs nothing.
Yes.
On a human level, that means the most.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So I think the first thing is we've got to keep our spirits up. When business is down, spirits have got to be up. And again, it's a test of our leadership. Ultimately, the way we act right now will be remembered long after any marketing or advertising campaign. So, this is a real opportunity. I think what we should also do is recognise that this situation is scary. I think only a mad person would suggest they're not at all concerned by this. Some people are really scared by this, and what we've got to do is signpost the opportunities that come out of this too, because it's not all negative. There's a lot of stuff that we're having to deal with which we don't like, and we wish we didn't have to, but there are opportunities that are presenting themselves as well, just like the way the nation is communicating now on digital platforms like never before. And we've got to use positive language wherever we can. We've got to keep it real, but let's use some positive language. Final book for those former box set binge watchers is this: Whale Done. Whale Done. That's a great book by some great, well-published writers that you'll recognise, the likes of Ken Blanchard, Jim Ballard, and so on. It's about finding positive language and actually looking for the good, to coin a phrase, catching people doing something good rather than just catching them out. That book's helped a number of our clients, so hopefully we will find a few new readers. I think what's important is that we recognise individual steps, Gavin, in the right direction, because this isn't going to be quick or easy.
No.
Recognise that change is being embraced. Recognise when things are being done differently, when new habits are being formed, and when progress is being made. And we may not progress every day, but if we're looking for those things and we're recognising those things, we'll have stuff to celebrate. So I would say let's encourage people to continue. And in our country, in the UK, up until this point, the UK population have been incredibly diligent in the way that they've handled this problem. When we're celebrating such things, we need to do it with sincerity in the words, and we need to be authentic in our actions, and we need to, in summary, redirect our energy wherever we can to the positive rather than the negative, and we'll find reasons to celebrate, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I think you've only got to look at Captain, or should I say now Honorary Colonel Tom Moore celebrating his 100th birthday yesterday. Was you know, to see how the country have got behind that story is just phenomenal, you know. And actually, luckily, you know, for us, he only lives a couple of miles down the road from us at Master Mortain, where I'm positioned in Ampthill, and we had the pleasure of seeing them Spitfires fly over the top of us yesterday. So, you know, that's a I know that's an exceptional way of celebrating that not businesses are obviously going to be getting Spitfires doing tumbles and rolls over the top of their garages or whatever. But I think it's really key what you said earlier. It doesn't have to be flamboyant. It doesn't have to be expensive. You know, recognition and celebration sometimes can just be in some very key and detailed words to people, coming back to that communication, you know, your fourth C. The word thank you sometimes goes a long way, doesn't it, in life? You know, it doesn't have to be an Amazon voucher. It doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be that, you know, just a simple letter, a simple email, a simple text saying thank you, appreciate what you do, can go a million miles for people, can't it? You know, so.
Indeed.
And
do you know what, Gavin? I'm constantly amazed by the ingenuity of people overcoming circumstances and difficulties, and it's motivating me. You know,
yeah.
I try to be as motivational as I can when I'm speaking, but I'm being motivated by a lot of the actions that are around me, and the collective strength of the UK, and I think the collective strength of the automotive sector.
Yeah.
Every part of it will see us through this. So if I may, can I sort of summarize my points and just let you have the last word, if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what the future holds, it's unclear. It's unclear. We don't know. We can predict. We're trying to reimagine, but it's unclear. But what I do know is that we have to change or die. If we don't change, we'll die, or at the very least, we'll be left behind. And we haven't come this far not to see it through. We've got to recognise we're stronger together. We need to collaborate, join forces, and pull those diverse opinions in. We need to face the facts, and we need to do what we know, what we need to do. What we need to do, those rather than just know. Definitely, we need to be authentic. Let's be true to what we stand for. That will build our brand and put many goodwill deposits in the Goodwill bank account. And then eventually we'll be able to make a withdrawal, won't we? Yeah. And we're going to focus our energies on the positives because there's plenty of negativity around us. We don't need to add to that. So can I share with you a quote which is on the wall of my office behind me? And it's from Winston Churchill. And there was a man who made some great mistakes in his career as well as some of his successes, but it inspires me at difficult times. And you may be able to read it over my shoulder, but I don't need to read it. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. And Gavin, we've got to continue. We've come too far. So unless you have any other questions, just keeping an eye on the clock. We don't want to make this too lengthy. If you've got any questions, I'd be delighted to answer them. And it's been my pleasure to join you this morning.
No, I mean, thanks, Carl. I mean, again, you know, this is the fourth one we've done. I think a completely different spin on the way that we've approached it. And, you know, your thoughts and the way that, you know, the 5 C's, I think actually are really, really useful in this hour of in our time of need in this industry and as a country, really. You know, it doesn't just boil down to the motor trade or business, does it? It's you know, it could be put into all sorts of terminology in your personal life as well. And I think, you know, you're absolutely right. You know, that's part of what we were trying to do with this was, you know, let's talk positively about it. I've been really buoyed actually and really excited about us getting back to some sort of normality, because actually the vast majority of garages, garage owners, dealerships, OEMs, national chains, whoever they are, actually have been on the whole very positive. You know, I was only on a phone call this morning to a colleague in the recruitment industry in New Zealand. You know, they're not as positive over there, I can tell you that now. You know, I was on a phone call the other day to a recruitment recruitment business in Australia. They're certainly not as positive over there as what we are here. You know, we can see all the stats where Australia and New Zealand are apparently kicking our backside in terms of dealing with this coronavirus and beating us to the punch, but economically and they're not that positive at all. And you know, the majority of people that, which is quite strange for Kiwis and Aussies to be that way, because generally they're quite positive people, but actually, you know, the vast majority of people I'm talking to in this industry are remaining upbeat and positive, which is good. You know, it's a good thing to thrive off. And like you say, collaboration, and if everyone's pointing in the same direction and we're all working together and pulling together in the same direction, then it can only end in a positive result, can't it?
I agree, Gavin. We can do this. We'll just be doing some things differently, that's for sure.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. So thanks so much today, Karl. Absolutely brilliant. Like you said, just keen to keep an eye on time. Don't want to make these into war and peace for people. We want to give people a quick snapshot and just get as many differing point of views from industry experts as we can. But you know, thanks so much, mate, for everything you've put together here for us today. I know you've worked really hard on putting this together for us over the last few days and put a lot of hours into this, so I'd really appreciate it. And obviously, anyone out there, you know, I've worked with Karl more recently, but known Karl for probably about 1.5 to 2 years now, and in my opinion, he's probably one of the best people in the UK in what he does. So you know, if anyone out there wants to talk to Karl about how he can help, I would absolutely recommend that and endorse that without a doubt. So please feel free to connect with Karl after this, because he's got some really interesting methods, which I think could be really useful in our hour of need at the moment. So thanks a lot, mate. And
you're welcome.
Speak to you soon.
Cheers.